Hello, my name is Josh Holland. This is Christopher Tillman. We are both pastors here in central Wisconsin, where currently our greatest excitement is that it was 58 degrees
Absolutely.
on Friday and that it will be 64 next Friday, which means we are inching towards the reason you live in Wisconsin, which is July, the best time of the year. And another thing we're inching towards here, Chris, is an idea that you and I have had on our minds for a couple years, and it's something we do on a weekly basis that we wanted to really capitalize on for the benefit of our church and anyone else that would like to take part in. Chris, we find often that there are things we desire to talk about that we just don't have time to, particularly on Sundays during a church service.
Yeah.
And we might be able to force them into the conversation on Sundays, but really that would be us taking a pet project or a soapbox and punching it in where it doesn't belong.
Right.
And yet these things that we find in our culture that are on our people's minds, on our minds consistently, we wanted a space where they can be discussed and responded to. And so that's our ultimate goal here, is to take ideas, particularly things like gender and race, political engagement, conscience, these types of things that honestly on a Sunday we just don't have time to dive into. And yet on Mondays through Saturdays, they are pressing on our people's minds. First, before we do that, I wanted to talk a little bit about our personal backgrounds and maybe what skill sets we might be able to bring to the table in these conversations.
Yeah. So for my part, I came into college, 150 years ago when I started undergraduate school.
You think you are much older than you
I
actually
do think I'm
are.
much older than I am. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like it, sometimes I don't. But when I started college in 2000, when I started college for real, I came in with the intent of actually beginning a career in government and law. And so, it's I think a pretty common endeavor for a lot of men who end up in pastoral ministry to go that route. There's a desire to be influencing and engaging in people's lives.
Agreed,
And
yeah.
so, as I was closing toward the end of my undergraduate education, I just kind of came to the conclusion that government is a great calling for some people. But for me, I kind of come to the conclusion that there's a way to engage people effectively that doesn't involve legislation and involves the gospel of Jesus being the center for how you go about communicating with people, the importance of ideas. And so, I ended up graduating with a bachelor's degree in public administration, a bachelor's degree in political science, and began a seminary career in 2006 that culminated in 2012 from Reformed Theological Seminary, a fantastic school that, as you are going through that program right now at RTS.
Wouldn't have heard about the program had it not been
Well,
for
there we
you,
go.
so
Yeah.
That's one of our ties.
It is, and it's a wonderful program that really forces you to think through things. And I think as a church, that's one of the priorities that we have is we want to encourage our people to think through Scripture and to think through big issues scripturally.
Right.
And so as pastors, this is our endeavor, this is our effort to try to kind of bring to our people and bring to those that we have the privilege of serving even outside of our church a perspective that we really feel strongly about and passionate about, both with a background for me in government, and you'll talk just a second about your background in media, but then ultimately as pastors to kind of bring these thoughts and ideas to bear in people's lives.
Yeah, and just a few words you've used, pastor, gospel of Jesus Christ, wanting our church to think through things, alerts the fact that this time will be unapologetically Christian.
Yeah.
As far as our ultimate end in episodes will be trying to respond with biblical worldview, biblical thinking, and yet the hope is that this is a venue where someone who is not a Christian or even anti-Christian would be able to listen in, hear analysis from a different point of view, and be able to see how a current maybe cultural worldview intersects with or is counteracted by a Christian worldview.
Yeah, absolutely.
For my part, my background is in broadcast communication. And so I went to school to talk about sports and to learn to write. And I dabbled in news on the side. And then as I was brought up here to central Wisconsin, that ended up being where I went, was the news side of things. And one thing I saw that I think it comes to bear in conversations about gender, sexuality, race, is just how ideas are packaged. Now, I've been in newsrooms with people that are incredibly well-intentioned reporters, and so I definitely don't hold a position that your local news, people are going to work on a daily basis with an axe to grind. And yet, I have been a part of seeing national news stories come down from ABC, CBS, NBC, and just to see the angles that are written,
Yeah.
and to compare them with a Christian worldview and say, oh, there, it may be 80% one worldview and then tag at the end, but the other person says this. And you really see, like, oh, the idea is packaged in a certain way. And so
Without alluding to the fact that it is packaged.
Right.
I think that's an important thing to put in perspective.
And so one of the things we're going to do is unpack that idea. What is this cultural position telling us? What is it? What are the implications? I know it's not sexy to think about implications of positions, and yet the implications are often so
We live with them every single
important.
day.
And then as well, I'm currently enrolled with pursuing a Master's of Divinity at Reformed Theological Seminary, where Chris graduated from, and what I think they do really well is they encourage and force you to read what are called primary sources. And so they don't just say, hey, we disagree with Aristotle. Aristotle's bad. Here's why he's wrong. They say, here's what Aristotle believed. Here's the fullness of what Aristotle believed. Here's what his critics said. Here's how he responded. Go read Aristotle. And so by the time you're done there, you've been able to get a comprehensive view of someone, even though you disagree with them, a comprehensive view and a cordial view.
Mm-hmm.
So then you can understand, and then you can respond, which I think takes me to maybe our goal in this time. We're going to start off with a book called Strange New World by Carl Trueman, and in it, one of the insightful things he says is that, Chris, to respond to our culture, we have to understand it, which sounds simple, except for the fact that we live in a time where we don't seek to understand, we seek to react.
Yeah.
And so what you and I are trying to do here is to slow down a little bit and to help anyone who's listening to understand first, and then to respond well, not just to react. Reacting is when we're passionate and emotional, but responding is where we might actually be able to provide a better solution. That's our goal here. Our first episode, we're going to talk about the idea of the self, which sounds very vague and very simple, but I think we can fill 20 minutes talking about it.
Absolutely.